The Cuban Revolution was a response to the corruption of Batista's regime and the great amount of U.S. involvement in Cuba's economy and politics. The corruption of Batista's regime and anti-U.S. resentment go hand in hand. Pro-U.S. Batista was able to run a corrupt government without worrying about being overthrown because his government made huge profits for the U.S. The Cuban Revolution began on July 26, 1953, when a group of about 100 armed men and women attacked the Moncada barracks. Both armed men and women were killed when Batista's army responded to the offensive. There were about 20 survivors. Among them was Fidel Castro, a young revolutionist who studied law in Havana. Fidel was soon captured after the authorities investigated. In 1955, Batista freed Castro and the rest of the political prisoners because he was pressured by civil leaders and the growing public oppression of his regime. Fidel and his brother Raúl went into exile in Mexico, where they gathered other exiled Cubans to fight in the revolution. It was then that Fidel met an Argentine doctor by the name of Ernesto Che Guevara, who joined Castro's cause 12 hours after they met. Fidel Castro toured to the U.S. looking for public and financial support. After training in Mexico under former military leader Alberto Bello, Fidel Castro and his group of revolutionaries left for Cuba in November of 1956. From 1956 through 1958, with the help of civilians, Castro staged successful attacks on small garrisons in the Sierra Maestra Mountains. Castro and Che spoke to the people of Cuba through the radio, spreading ideas of revolution. Finally, in 1959, Fidel Castro marched his army through Havana in the first week of January. He claimed victory over Batista's regime. Not only did the Cuban Revolution seek to overthrow Batista, but it also sought to nationalize U.S. companies in Cuba. By October 1959, all U.S.-owned businesses were nationalized under the Cuban state. Castro also attempted to industrialize Cuban production and create a successful system of sugar exportation. Fidel passed the Agrarian Reform Act, which granted ownership over land to peasants who were sharecroppers prior to the revolution. This revolution brought free universal education, universal health care, and government housing to the people of Cuba. Under Fidel Castro, within a year in power, he turned Cuba into a militarized state and moved towards a communist state. It was then, however, that Cuba's plan for economic prosperity failed. No country was interested in Cuba's sugar, their main product of exportation. Castro turned to the Soviet Union for support. The Soviet Union agreed to help, but in return, the Soviet Union was able to influence Cuba's economic management. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a result from the relationship with the Soviet Union. Fidel allowed the Soviet Union to station their missiles in Cuba, therefore causing the U.S. and the Soviet Unions close to a nuclear war. The relationship between the U.S. and Cuba was damaged. As a dictator, Fidel imprisoned thousands of Cubans for speaking against him in the first years of his rulership. Also, Fidel's overthrow of Batista inspired many other revolutions in Latin America. The Cuban Revolution demonstrated that an armed struggle to overthrow a dictatorship is effective against the modernized technological military.
Vietnam has definitely demonstrated to the world, to every revolutionary, and all the people confronted with imperialism, how, even with modern technology, a stronger and massive weaponry, and even with a coalition of forces, well armed like those deployed by the U.S. in Vietnam, it's impossible to break down revolutionary and guerrillero movement supported by the people. I believe today nobody can deny that the United States has failed its war against the heroic people from Vietnam. And we believe this is one of the greatest favors the Vietnamese people offered to the world.
Operation Quick Kick, which favored Castro's alliance with the Soviet Union. In exchange for the alliance with Khrushchev, in July 1962, Castro began to let arm shipments of building parts for several varieties of nuclear missiles. Then, when U.S. found out, great tension engulfed the world. It lasted 13 days until they reached an agreement. Kennedy promised not to invade and remove U.S. missiles from Turkey. In exchange to removing the Cuban missiles, all in all, the Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis served as a turning point in the Cold War.
Riding by you on the corner block slanging, living that boss's life. Girls come running when they see me coming, living that boss's life. You can have anything, just don't touch my money.
This is for the West and the East and the dirty South. Khakis.